Look at Tobias Wolff's That Room and answer the forum questions. That room. The summer after my first year of high school, I got a case of independence and started hitchhiking the farms up and down the valley for day work, picking berries and mucking out stalls. Then I found a place where the farmer paid me 10 cents an hour over minimum wage, and his plump, childless wife fed me lunch and fussed over me while I ate. So I stayed on there until school started. Man, there was a lot going on here in the beginning. Again, think as well of narrator, point of view, who's talking, who's telling the story. We're back to a first person point of view, right? And we know, well, the summer after my first year of high school. How old are we after our first year of high school? 15, 16, some might be 14, 15, 15, 16. I got a case of independence. What the hell's a case of independence? Think of this when we're that age. What are we feeling when we're like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18? You're feeling grown a little, right? You want to get out in the world. You're tired of being under listening to mom and dad, listening to rules. I got a case of independence. I want to make some money. Think about your first job, right? How does it feel when you got your first job and you got your first paycheck? It's a good feeling, right? Like I worked, I earned this money, and I could do damn well whatever I want with it, right? While shoveling shit or hacking weeds out of a drainage ditch, I'd sometimes stop to gaze out toward the far fields, where the hands, as the farmer called them, were bucking bales of hay into a wagon, stacking them to teetering height. We know we'll get this later, the juxtaposition. We have a white narrator. We have a white male narrator here. And think of the articulation of the speech as well. We know this is a moment, like the narrator, I would argue here, is college educated. He's articulate. He has attention to detail. And we know this story or this is a memory. It's farther ahead in the future, but the narrator's looking back at this time, right? When we'll get to that. While shoveling shit or hacking weeds out of the drainage ditch, I'd sometimes stop to gaze out toward the far fields, where the hands, as the farmer called them, were bucking bales of hay into a wagon, stacking them to teetering heights. Now and then a bark of laughter reached me, a tag end of conversation. The farmer hadn't let me work in the hay because I was too small, but I beefed up over the winter and the following summer he let me join the crew. So I was a hand, a hand. I went a little crazy with that word with the pleasure of applying it to myself. Having a job like this changed everything. It delivered you from the reach of your parents, from the caustic scrutiny of your friends. It set you free among strangers in the eventful world, where you could practice being someone else until you were someone else. It put money in your pocket and allowed you to believe that your other life, your inessential parenthetical life at home and school, was just a sop to those deluded enough to imagine you still needed them. That moment, that's a beautiful moment there. And that's the moment we know the speaker is very educated, very self aware, very articulate, attention to detail. A hand. It's also a thought, too. It reminds me when I was in Ohio, a lot of times, Toledo, Ohio, when I was in the master's program. I would get a summer job at a factory. Before I moved to Rhode Island, I moved furniture all summer, driving a truck moving furniture. And it's a job like, man, yeah, I'm working. The whole time, though, I knew that this is only temporary. This is only temporary. I was only gonna work a couple months, make a little bit of money and head out. Whereas other folks, this is their lives, right? It delivered you from the reach of your parents, You can get out, you can make some money, right? And then here we get into the description of the others. What I love about this story too is we get this uh, straight white man who's really balancing socio-political racial dynamics in this story expertly and from a distance, and he zooms in and out. It's a masterful look at his perspective. First straight white guy we're reading this semester too. There were 3 others working in the fields with me. The farmer's shy, muscle-bound nephew, Clemson, who was in my class at school, but to whom I condescended because he was just an inexperienced kid. Clem, he's the dumb oaf, right? He's the dumb oaf. The speaker's the smart boy, right? He's a whip smart, but smaller. And 2 Mexican brothers, Miguel and Eduardo. Miguel, short and stolid and solitary, spoke very little English, but rakish Eduardo did the talking for both of them. While the rest of us did the heavy work, Eduardo provided advice about girls and told stories in which he featured as a trickster and deft, indefatigable swordsman. He played it for laughs, but in the very materials of his storytelling, the dance halls and bars, the bumbling border guards, the clod-brained farmers and their insatiable wives, the larcenous cops, the whores who loved him, I felt the actuality of a life I knew nothing about, yet somehow contrived to want for myself. A real life in a real world. All right, a lot going on there. Miguel, he's silent. He's the brooder. He doesn't say much. Solitary type spoke. Eduardo, we've all worked with an Eduardo, right? He's the talker. He's the center of attention. Eduardo's like, man, I got this story. I got this story. I got this story. Good times, always. Women all over. Advice about girls. Indefatigable swordsman. What's swordsman? What's that mean? What's that an allusion to? Think of, right? You can ask me. Indefatigable swordsman. He slept around a lot, right? He played it for laughs. Their insatiable wives, the whores who loved him, and Eduardo. If you're an older person or experienced person, you're like, Eduardo, he's talking shit, right? He's just telling our story. But to the narrator, who's younger, he's 15. Man, Eduardo, man, he's been around. He's one of those. And Eduardo knows his audience too, right? He knows the younger guys. He could play this character up. So, man, what a contrast between Miguel and Eduardo. While Eduardo talked, Miguel labored silently beside us, now and then grunting with the weight of a bale, his acne-scarred face flushed with heat, narrow eyes even tighter against the sun. Clemson and I sprinted and flagged, laughing at Eduardo's stories, goading him with questions. Miguel never flagged and never laughed. He sometimes watched his brothers with what appeared a mild curiosity at all. Eduardo's so popular, Eduardo has an audience. What does everyone like Eduardo want? One of those gregarious, talkative story. They want an audience, and they got it in the narrator and Clem. How much? Think of this. Look back to the beginning. The farmer paid me 10 cents an hour over minimum wage. What do you think the farmer pays Miguel and Eduardo? Probably less than minimum wage. Who works harder, Miguel and Eduardo or Clem and the narrator? We can go back. Miguel busts his ass. Miguel works harder, and they're a little older. And the narrator and Clem, at least the narrator, 10 cents over minimum wage. So think of that. It doesn't come out and say that, but think of that. We know that. We know damn well the farmer pays Miguel and Eduardo less. We know that. The farmer who owned a big spread with a lot of hay to bring in should have hired more hands. That tells you the farmer's cheap. There should be more people working. The farmer's trying to get away with getting the most amount of work out of the least amount of people. Fucking capitalism 101, right? For all you folks. And he probably pays them. So that tells us too, he's not paying Eduardo and Miguel very much. He had only the 4 of us, and there was always the danger of rain. He was a relaxed, amiable man, but as the season wore on, he grew anxious and began to push us harder and keep us longer. Let's get this done. Let's work. During the last week or so, I spent the nights with Clemson's family just down the road so I can get to the farm with the others at sunup and work until dusk. They're working all day. The bales were heavy with dew when we started bringing them in. The air in the loft turned steamy from fermentation, and Eduardo warned the farmer that the hay might combust. Eduardo and Miguel have worked a long time. They know what they're doing. Eduardo, you don't want to put all this hay in here. It'll blow, right? It'll catch fire. But he held us to his schedule, limping, sunburned, and covered with scratches. I could hardly get out of bed in the morning. But although I griped with Clems and Eduardo, I was secretly glad to take my place beside him, to work as if I had no choice. Why is the speaker secretly glad, happy? I'm working, I'm a hand, I'm happy. Because why? At the end of August, end of September, back to being in 10th grade. You know, you're playing grown up, or you think you're playing, but you get to go back to being a kid, right? You get to go back to school in the fall. Well, what's going to happen to Miguel and Eduardo? They're not playing. This is their life, right? They're looking for other work. Eduardo's car broke down toward the end of the week, and Clemson started driving him and Miguel to and from the decrepit motel where they lived with other seasonal workers. Sometimes pulling up to their door, we'd all just sit there saying nothing. We were that tired. Then one night, Eduardo asked us in for a drink. Clemson, being a good boy, tried to beg off, but I got out with Miguel and Eduardo, knowing he wouldn't leave. Come on, Clem. He looked at me. The narrator, you can get a lot from the narrator in this short story. Clem's the big, strong, he's a follower, right? The narrator, he's a clever, he's the leader. But the title, That Room. Wait till they enter that room. That room, Jesus. What does that tell you? Damn, you ever walk into a room or a house or a place or somewhere and you're like, damn, look at this dirty dish mausoleum. Even worse. I bet you this is even worse. The brothers had done their best, making their beds, keeping their clothes neatly folded in open suitcases, but you got swamped by the smell of mildew that moment you stepped inside. The floor was mushy underfoot and shedding squares of drab linoleum, the ceiling bowed and stained. The overhead light didn't quite reach the corners. Behind the mildew was another unsettling smell. So this is a dump, beyond a dump hotel room, all probably Miguel and Eduardo could afford, and they're staying here all summer while they work on the farm. This horrific room. What do you think the narrator's room like is at home? The narrator's mom washes the clothes, folds the clothes, there's a meal every night, she takes care, she probably makes his bed, right? He's never been in a place like this. This is eye-opening, this is shocking. Think of what we learned. Remember the first day. What did we learn in school and learn out of school? The narrator, the speaker story is learning, and what's masterful about this story is the narrator isn't learning this at this moment. Think of Nia at the end of Saving Sorority. I have no magic at all. I wish I was a Naga so I could just burn the whole fucking thing down. There is no magic. Nia's gonna get older and look back and be like, oh, this is why this happened. The narrator is not kind of putting all these dots together and looking at how Miguel and Eduardo, just the whole socio-political dynamics that the farmer is just caught up in. This is why the story is written from a farther point of view where he's like, damn. But the moment the narrator steps in that room, he can never step out of it, right? Metaphorically. He cannot unsee that. He cannot unsee how these people live. Once he walks into this room, he can't go back. Clemson was a fastidious guy and writhed in distress as I made a show of being right at home. We poured rye into our empty stomachs and listened to Eduardo, and before long we were all drunk. Someone came to the door and spoke to him in Spanish, and Eduardo went outside and didn't come back. Miguel and I kept drinking. Clemson was half asleep, his chin declining slowly toward his chest and snapping up again. So think of this too, before we get to the really important moment. Narrator. Probably it's not the first time he drank. He's probably been drunk and sick a few times when you're young. But also when you're young, what do? You're like, good. You don't, when you get older, you're like, I'm gonna pace myself. I'm not gonna slug this rye whiskey down. They're just drinking it nonstop, right? What do you think about this moment? Then Miguel looked at me. What does he see when Miguel looks at the narrator? He slitted his eyes and looked at me hard without blinking and began to protest an injustice done him by our boss, or maybe another boss. Think of all the Romero's bosses. I could barely understand his English, and he kept breaking into Spanish, which I didn't understand at all, but he was angry. I understood that much. What does Miguel see when he sees the narrator? You motherfucker. You got it all. You're gonna have it all. You got it so easy. I gotta kill myself just for this. At some point, he went across the room and came back and put a pistol on the table right in front of him. Damn. That's when you know you're in a. That's when you know you start looking for the escape route, right? When you're at the party and the gun goes off. Get the hell out of there. A revolver, a long barrel, most of the blue worn off. Miguel stared at me over the pistol and resumed his complaint entirely in Spanish. He was looking at me, but I knew he was seeing someone else. I had rarely heard him speak before. Now the words poured out in an aggrieved sing-song. And I saw that his own voice was lashing him on somehow, the very sound of his indignation proving that he had been wronged, feeding his rage, making him hate whoever he thought I was. I was too afraid to speak. All I could do was smile. You know damn well Miguel and Eduardo know the narrator and Clem are making more money too. 'Cause why? That's something you learn when you get older. Even my colleagues, they talk about how much money. You don't, that's, I don't know if your parents taught you that or if you just know that. You don't talk about how much you make with your coworkers. That's just something you don't do, right? 15, oh, I'm getting paid 10 more cents. He's naive. He doesn't know anything. And Miguel and Eduardo hear this and they're like, damn, these two kids, this boy who's in the 10th grade is getting paid more than I am. And you could just feel them seething at the farm owner. But what the hell are they going to do? They can't quit. They need the job, right? All right. Here's a question on number 8. Our 8 question. And so you have the moments in the present time with the speaker, the narrator, Eduardo, Miguel, and Clem. They're back in the, he's working on farm. Then you get the zoom out, right? This middle section who's so important where the narrator is connecting all these other aspects. That room, once you enter it, you never really leave. You can forget you're there. You can go on as if you hold the reins at the course of your life. Yet, even its length will reflect the force of your character and the wisdom of your judgments. And then you hit, you can forget you're there. You can go on as if you hold the reins, as if we're completely in control of our lives, as if we're in control. We have it all in the control. That the course of your life, even its length, will reflect the force of your character and the wisdom of your judgment. The force of my character, my hard work, and the wisdom. I work hard to make the right decision. Everything's going to work out all right. And then you hit an icy patch on a turn one sunny March day, and the wheel in your hands becomes a joke. And you no more than a spectator to your own dreamy slide toward the verge. And then you remember where you are. You're in control till you hit that icy patch. The icy patch could be, as kids say, literal, or it could be the horrible, tragic thing that happens in your life. You thought everything was under control. Not so, right? Or you board a bus with 30 other young men. It's early, just before dawn. That's when the buses always leave, their lights dim to avoid the attention of the Quakers outside the gate. But it doesn't work, and they're waiting, silently holding up their signs, looking at you not with reproach but with sadness and sympathy as the bus drives past them and on toward the airport in a plane that will take you where you would not go. All right, and I talk about this here. That moment is a moment, it's an allusion, ALLUSIO, an allusion to young men being shipped off to Vietnam, the Quakers protesting the war. What happens, and we can infer that from the author's age and also a few context clues. The Quakers, if you're not in college, you're going to get drafted for Vietnam. You're going to be put on a bus and shipped off somewhere you couldn't probably even point to on a map for what, and you might not come back. And the Quakers are looking at you with sadness because you're going somewhere you don't want to go. And at this moment, you know exactly what your desires count for in your plans and all your strength of body and will. Then you know where you are, as you will know where you are when those you love die before their time. dark here, but it's life. It's not, we all know someone who's died young, and it's like, it's not, why does this person die? Why did this person, car wreck, get cancer, drug over, die? Then you know where you are when those you love die before your time, the time you had planned for them, for yourself with them. And when your daily allowance of words and dreams is withheld from you, your daily allowance of words and dreams is withheld from you. And when your daughter drives the car straight into a tree. Damn. I got that. I took from that moment that the narrator's daughter, drove into a tree. And if she walks away without a scratch, you still feel the dark ceiling close overhead. And at any moment, something can happen to my daughter. At any moment, she can be taken from me. And know where you are. We think we're walking along, moving along in life, everything's going great until something happens. And it's like, damn, life is so precarious, so nebulous, so slippery. And what can you do but what you did back in this awful room with Miguel hating you for nothing and a pistol ready to hand? Smile and hope for a change of subject, right? You get that moment there where we have that interlude, that room that makes the narrator think of all these things, various rooms. Back to the moment, Miguel hating you for nothing and a pistol ready at hand. Smile and hope for a change of subject. It came this time. We're back in the hotel room. Clems had bolted up from his chair, bent forward, and puked all over the table. Miguel stopped talking. He stared at Clemson as if he'd never seen him before, and when Clemson began retching again, Miguel jumped up and grabbed him by the shirt and pushed him toward the door. I took over and helped Clemson outside while Miguel looked on, shrieking his disgust. Disgust. Now he was the fastidious one. Revulsion had trumped rage, had trumped even hatred. Oh, how sweetly I tended Clemson that night. I thought he saved my life, and maybe he had. Thank God Clemson puked everywhere. We don't know how that would have turned. Miguel was pissed. And Miguel wasn't hating the narrator and Clemson personally. They were symbols of the hate of everything they've been dealt with. Last two lines. The farmer's barn burned to the ground that winter. When I heard about it, I said, didn't I tell him I did? I told that stupid son of a bitch not to put up with hay. Eduardo, but through the narrator's voice, right? Man, there's a lot going on. Let's look at the questions. Answer question 1 on page 226. Why does the narrator describe his life at home and school as inessential, parenthetical, in comparison to a real life in a real world? We all feel this way, right? Some of you might feel this way now. I'm in school. I gotta do homework. I gotta watch this asshole on this video. I just want to get out there and work and live life. What don't you know yet, Once you're out there working every day, living life, it's like, man, it'll grind you down and beat you down. Inessential, parenthetical, what's in parentheses? Just the kind of asides before we get to the real life. The narrator's chomping at the bit here. He wants to get out and work. We get real life in that section on 225, that room, though, That's the paradox, a contradiction. When we're young, at his age, 15, we want to get out there. We're in a hurry to grow up. I want to go back to those moments. I want to go back to when I was younger, right? Why is the narrator so surprised, disgusted by that room where Eduardo and Miguel are staying? That's question 6. That room, Jesus. The narrator's never seen anything like it. People live like this. Oh my God. The narrator's room at home is his mom does his laundry, mom makes his bed, everything's clean. The narrator's never seen such squalor and filth. That's a whole new world, right? And he's like disgusted. And at the moment he's disgusted by the room, looking back through this text, people live this way, Why does the owner of the farm invite the narrator and Clement to his house, but does not invite Eduardo Miguel? The owner of the farm also pays the narrator and Clem more too, right? 10 cents, at least the narrator, 10 cents over minimum wage. He probably gives Clem even more because it's family. We know why. There's Miguel and Eduardo are never, they're them. They're those people, the brown people, the Mexican people. They're them. They don't cross this. You're one of us, come on in, have the soda or have the drink, food, whatever. So we get that subtly there, right? Question 8, look closely at the two paragraphs on 225. The one begins with that room. What does the narrator mean by that statement? Once you enter it, you never leave. We touch upon that a little bit. Once you learn something, you cross that threshold, you figure those things out. You can never unlearn it, right? You can never look back. You can never unlearn the hard lessons you learn. Maya, when she goes home, Mommy, Daddy, why was there a rope around that man's neck? She can never go back to the place she was before she learns those horrible things. Yeah, all those, that room, the narrator's thinking of all those moments. You think you have life by the reins. You think you're in control, but you're not in control. There could be something around the corner. Something might happen. Something, you know. What are some rooms a person enters and can never leave? If you ever go to jail or prison, you can never leave that room. Or you leave when you get out, but something changes. Hospital room. You go to visit somebody, they may never come. You're not the same before the sickness, right? Think of all these rooms we leave and never enter, and can never leave, enter and never leave. On a positive note, hell, school. You can enter a college classroom, and your life can be changed. So there's a positive moments as well. But you can that hotel room where Miguel and Eduardo were staying. That's the first room the narrators like, and then everything else was measured from them.